I think history matters, so first I'm going to give you a little bit of a history lesson here, and then the other thing I think is the devil is in the details. So I'm going to try to get into detail a little bit about what's happened recently in Afghanistan. I can't see it, but presumably you guys can see a map there, right? And take a look at where Afghanistan is. It's got India to the south. It's got over the last few centuries, it's got Russia to the north. It's got China to the east, and it's got the Iranian-Persian world to the west. And what that means is that over the course of thousands of years, Afghanistan has been the place you have to go through if you're going from any of these big civilizations to any of the other ones, whether to trade, to raid, or to invade. All right? So from any of these places, whenever there's been a sort of a conquering power, they've wanted to get that high ground of Afghanistan, because from there they have a strategic position over the fruited plains on the other side. And that's why in the 18th and 19th centuries, Russia was so interested in controlling Afghanistan, and that in turn is why British India decided that they weren't going to let that happen, so they invaded Afghanistan and occupied it and executed a regime change. They took out the king that was there, they put in a more pliant guy. And it was easy. It took a couple of months, I think. Nothing to it. They went through the big cities, they conquered Kabul, and that was it. 2 years later, the entire British community and the whole British army and its Indian adjuncts were desperately trying to get out of Afghanistan, and only one guy made it. That was in 1841. Go 100 years forward now, where there was Tsarist Russia before, now it's the Soviet Union. Where it was British India to the south, now it's the Western Bloc dominated by the US interest. It's the Cold War. And Afghanistan is still this place right between these two empires, both of whom are competing to control that area, at first through influence. But eventually, that's why in 1978 really, the balance broke, and the Soviet Union invaded Afghanistan, and it was easy. It took a couple of weeks. They came down with tanks, they occupied Kabul, and game over. Only it wasn't over. Within a year, every province was in revolt, and then there was a 9-year war in which the Russians, or the Soviets, as their idea of how to get this job done, was to bomb the hell out of the countryside, which resulted in about 8 million refugees, at that time the largest refugee population in the world, living in Pakistan and Iran. But it's worse than those numbers even sound, because those were only the women and children of rural families and tribes. And so this event broke a whole bunch of families. It's really a devastation to the social fabric of a society. The women and children were in the refugee camps. The men went back into the country to fight. They were guerrilla armies. And over the course of a 9-year war with US money and US eventually stingers, the guerrillas won that war, and they chased the Soviets out. At that point in 1990 to 92, that was the point at which what was needed in Afghanistan was a peace conference among the victors, not a peace conference between the victors and the losers. A peace conference that would have to have been brokered by the United States and the international community. But at that point, somewhat famously to us Afghans anyhow, Milton Bearden, the CIA station chief in charge of that area, rejected the idea of having anything further to do with Afghanistan because, as he put it, nobody gives a shit about Afghanistan. And so the US and everybody else disengaged, went away, and the guerrilla armies then stormed into the cities in order to fight over the scraps. And in a country where the countryside had been bombed to hell over 9 years, now the cities were destroyed. And when the cities were destroyed, this exhausted and destroyed country, there was an organization put together by elements in the Pakistan government called the Taliban, whose cadre were refugee boys, Afghan refugee boys who had been raised in, or in many cases were born in those camps in Pakistan. And you know, these are guys who had the worst childhood in the world. And someone comes along and puts guns in their hands and says, "You're the army of God. Go get them, boys." But the controlling power there wasn't, you know, these refugee guys. There was an organization of some kind that was somehow connected to the Inter-Services Intelligence, the agency in Pakistan, through which all that American aid to the Mujahideen, the Afghan guerrillas, had been funneled. A lot of it stuck. ISI turned into a state within a state, and through the Taliban, that was a means for this part of the Pakistan government to take over Afghanistan. All right, now I'm going to jump forward to 2001, and I'll tell you that when the U.S. decided to do military intervention in Afghanistan, and you may know that there was like 2 or 3 weeks of bombing of the cities, and Donald Rumsfeld at the end of that, in a befuddled and bewildered way, said, "Gee, there's no good targets in Afghanistan, and you couldn't accomplish anything that way." And I think most people don't know that actually what happened at that point was that the United States put diplomatic and financial pressure on Pakistan, because that's where the controlling influence really started. And they, using the influence that the United States had, they made the Pakistan government quit supporting the Taliban who were in Kabul, without which the Taliban could not survive, and they quickly fell and melted into the hills. This is something that could have been done at any time, even before 9/11, actually. But when they left, and then it was 2002, and I went back to the area, and I first went to the refugee camps in Pakistan, and then in the summer I went to Kabul. And I can tell you guys that in 2002, in the summer of that year in Kabul, even though, you know, what I expected was to land in a place where every third person I saw was missing a limb, perhaps, and the streets would be filled with widows in burqas begging, and the fact is, the streets were filled with women in burqas begging, and a lot of people were disabled because of landmines and war and stuff. Even so, Kabul 2002 was one of the most euphoric places I've been in my life. And it's because people thought the war was over. And they not only thought the war was over, they looked at America as the liberators, because those Afghans in Kabul and points north, they didn't want the Taliban, and they were glad they were gone, and they thought the United States had come to help. And everybody was talking about, including, you know, it was very much part of the statements from the United States, a Marshall Plan for Afghanistan. And I would just, in that time that I was there, I kept running into people who were eager to get back into studying, because now it made sense. Now there was going to be peace in Afghanistan, and you could build a life. And you didn't have to spend all your time learning guncraft. It made sense to go to school and learn to be an engineer, or study literature, or study art. I saw people taking up those professions. I ran into people who had schemes for building wedding supply stores, because now with peace coming, there was going to be weddings. And I met a guy who wanted to start a cosmetics factory, because the Taliban gone, there was now going to be a market for cosmetics in Afghanistan. They said, why import that from Dubai? Let's build our own. So there's all this entrepreneurial kind of thing going on. And everybody expected that somehow or other, with the United States interested in Afghanistan now, all this peacemaking, rebuilding of the social fabric of Afghanistan would get going. And there was so much energy for that in Afghanistan. That was 2002. By the end of the year, I happened to know that when the budget was prepared, somebody near the end said, "Where's the line item for reconstruction aid to Afghanistan?" Oh my God, that had been forgotten. There was nothing in the budget for Afghanistan. They scrambled and they put something in at the end of the year, but not very much. Then the next year, the reconstruction budget was increased, but by that time, the drum was beating already for the war in Iraq. So Afghanistan went on the back burner, and this war in Iraq started. Okay, now I think what I want to talk, this is the heart of what I want to talk about, is what happened in the next 3 or 4 years in Afghanistan, because things were at there was a tipping point between, I would say, order and chaos in Afghanistan, and there was a situation there where everybody was trying to make up their minds about what they were going to do with the rest of their lives based on whether they thought there was going to be peace or there was going to be war and chaos. And by war, at that point, what you mean in Afghanistan is a war of everybody against everybody. And if that's what's going on, you're going to get ready for that, and it requires certain preparations. But if there's going to be peace, then you're going to do certain other things. And if more people sign on to this, there's going to be peace, and I'm going to do other things, there will be peace. So that was the teetering balance in Afghanistan from, let's say, 2002 to 2006 or so. And any time in that period where somebody would be able to, say, commit an act of sabotage or kill an aid worker or something, it would make people nervous and say, maybe it's going to go back to the old chaos. But every time someone, persisted and did something like build a theater troupe that went around the country, giving children's shows about a new society. That was one of the things that was happening there. There was all kinds of little enterprises like that were trying to get started. There was a guy I knew about or I met him in Afghanistan, who had invented in the Taliban days a device that could be a solar heater during the day and a satellite dish, TV satellite dish at night. It was popular in Afghanistan during the Taliban days. But later he wanted to get a business going, construct that, because you could use that in all the villages. There was a guy who had an invented device that was a small hydroelectric kind of thing that you could generate enough electricity for 20, 30 houses out of a little stream coming down the mountain. And Afghanistan is full of villages that are built around the little stream coming down the mountain. Imagine if there had been some kind of investment help for somebody like that to proliferate this kind of business. It didn't happen. And even though there was money spent on reconstruction in Afghanistan, and it is being spent, it was big ticket items that was organized as contracts to large private companies, in which the aid was so structured that 75 cents out of every dollar had to be spent here in America and not there. And 75 cents of every dollar spent here means, of course, there's planning, there's logistics, there's this, there's that. But eventually some amount of that money gets over there, and it gets over there in the form of engineers and experts and financial consultants and stuff who oversee a project that's, say, building a road that will enable traffic to move more easily between the airbase at Bagram and the airbase at Kandahar, or between Kabul and Kandahar is another way to put it. But now you have one engineer, let's say, $200,000 salary, and he needs a bodyguard, $200,000 there. They need to be in an armored car that's very expensive, $200,000. And they need an Afghan translator who's usually a guy from, it's like someone like me from America who speaks both languages, also very well paid. You have a package of $800,000 driving around overseeing the construction of a highway, let's say, where the locals are working for $20 a week breaking rocks. You can imagine how that feels if you're a local. And you're working to build something you didn't really ask for. You wanted to get some help putting in a new irrigation well in your land so that you could produce this new kind of grape. You had some ideas, but that's not happening. But now what is happening is that with this sudden influx of money that's come in that has nothing to do with the economy, a few people are getting rich, a lot of people are not getting rich at all, but it's driving prices up. So like in the city of Kabul now, in the course of those 4 years that I'm talking about, there was a property that somebody was renting for $40. This is a foreigner, an American who was over there trying to do some good deed. And they had an office that they were renting for $40 in the Taliban day, and 4 years later the rent had climbed to $4,000. Imagine that, and in this period, police officers are making anywhere from $50 to $75 a month, teachers the same, postal workers, administrators of all kinds. And gas still costs whatever it costs. If it costs $5 here, it costs $5 there. Somebody told me they went to a post office and they tried to buy a 10 Afghani stamp, let's call it a 10-cent stamp. And the guy said, well, that'll be $1.50. I'm translating it to American terms. And this is what you're often, you know, if you read about in the media, this is called corruption. But it's not corruption. You know, this guy then told, my friend said, how can you charge that? It says right here on the stamp, 10 Afghanis. He said, I'll charge 10 Afghanis when I make a living wage. You know, until then, this is my only leverage. I got to feed my family by charging whatever I can get out of a stamp. And so that's like pervasive in a society. So things are not happening, it's starting to break down. And over the next 4 years, the euphoria that I experienced in Afghanistan in '02 has turned into something very different. And now that's in the city of Kabul, where things are relatively good. Out there in the countryside, which is littered with landmines still, and where people can't you know, clear enough of their soil to make a living growing wheat, because you need a lot of land to grow enough wheat to feed your family, and you're going to be expending children to clear the landmines, because, you know, you send them out and then they don't make it sometimes. So you're going to clear just as little bit of land that will enable you to make your living, and that's maybe this much land, this stage I'm sitting on. I saw pieces of land that had been cleared and were being planted that were that big. What can you grow on a piece of land this big that you can actually feed your family on? Poppies. So poppy cultivation replaced all other agriculture in Afghanistan. And some of the reconstruction programs that I know about were in areas where people had, you know, it's an agricultural area, and it was an agricultural project, and that consisted of giving funding to local people to buy American farm products. And that means that the local farmers, with all their other troubles, they lose their market. So they're going to grow the only thing they can, which is poppies. And then that, we see it as a standalone problem. So we undertake to bomb the poppy field so that they won't have this thing. It's all a system, you know, and we're not dealing with it that way. So now I come to my final point, which is over the course of those 4 years that I'm talking about, I kept seeing in the media the word Taliban, and the Taliban are coming back, the Taliban are getting stronger, but I personally do not see that it makes any sense really to talk about the Taliban, because the acts of sabotage and savagery that they're talking about, I am dead sure these are carried out by all kinds of different people for all kinds of different motives. Some of them are saboteurs coming from Pakistan. Some of them are like teenagers who have nothing to do and are, you know, got gang-like energy. And there's you know, old tribal chiefs that are trying to gain credibility versus the new commanders who got reputation in the war, and they're trying to gain some name by doing an action against the foreigners. So gradually, I think what has happened in Afghanistan is that because of the failure of the peace, basically, you know, because of the failure of this reconstruction to take hold and rebuild anything and re-sew together the social fabric, what's happened is that the old themes of Afghan culture have gathered themselves up again, and when you hear Taliban, you're not hearing about something that perhaps existed in '01, which was an actual organization with leaders and a headquarters someplace and all like that. What you're hearing about is something very amorphous and movement-like, and which anybody can sign on to this week and leave next week, so that, to me, continually using the phrase Taliban gives the wrong impression that there's a discrete number of people who are Taliban, which feeds the notion that if you can round them up somehow and kill them or imprison them or something, then there will be no Taliban. And it's not that kind of thing. You know, what we have in Afghanistan is a case of malaria, and you can't fight malaria by killing mosquitoes. You can only do it by draining the swamp, and that's what we have to be thinking about. So now, when we come to the question of taking all the troops out or not, well, maybe yes, maybe no, but that's not going to happen in the next week or 2 weeks or month or year. But what I feel like are a couple of things that need to be done now, and that all Americans, or most Americans, many Americans, would rally to this. This makes a lot of sense. And one of them is putting pressure on this administration to come up with a mission statement to say, what is it we're trying to accomplish in Afghanistan? Tell us that. And that has to include Congress discussing it, because I don't think that's happening. It's like a fait accompli. We know what this war is. It's a war against terror. We know what terrorists are, but I don't think we know those things. And I think that if we were to be able to bring the administration to saying that what we want to end up with in Afghanistan, and I think we do want to end up with this in Afghanistan, I think it's to all of our interests. I speak as an American now, not as an Afghan, you're on both. But I think what we do want to end up with is a stable, peaceful Afghanistan that's friendly to the United States. And if you have that as your idea of a destination you're going to, you can always compare that to any policy, especially putting in more troops or something, say, how does that help get us to there? Because for the most part, looking at this strictly as a military problem is increasing the very problem that I think subliminally we say we're trying to solve. And then the other thing that I think we ought to do is we ought to get a big public conversation going about what happened to the money and what happened to the peace. Why couldn't we do that? Why can't we do it now? I think we could still do it. We could still do something along those lines now. But we can't just let that be something that bureaucrats now take care of that. We send some funds over and some private corporation does it. You know, so let's talk about how you really do recreate a wounded society like Afghanistan. All right. I don't know if I used up my time or not, but maybe it's time to turn it over to questions. This border between Afghanistan and Pakistan actually runs right in the middle of another kind of shadow nation that has wanted to exist, which is Pashtunistan. And the border was created by the Russians, the Russians and the British, and it's an arbitrary border, so it splits the homeland of a bunch of people. Now, I don't think that it's a whole other question of whether that Duran line should be erased or not. I think it's a problematic area, and you're going to have problems no matter what. But one thing I want to say is that our military presence is all along that border, and that fact reifies the metaphor that there's something on the other side that we're keeping out. But actually, we're in the middle of the thing that we're keeping out. It's on both sides, you know. So the metaphor doesn't make any sense. And now in Pakistan, you know, the demographic center of gravity for Pakistan is Punjab and Sindh, and Pakistan's own problem is Northwest Frontier Province and Balochistan. So they have that problem. And any kind of action, which the military action is one that inspires and helps organize the forces in the Northwest Frontier Province that are anti-Pakistan government. In the same way that happened in Iraq, where because there was chaos and action going on, it drew Islamist activists from all over the world. I think now for those soldier of fortune Islamists, that's where the action is. So yeah, I think that's a problematic aspect.
Another question? Yes.
Throughout the Muslim world, there is, and I think actually throughout the world, there is a kind of a schism between the city and the countryside. And the city in Afghanistan and throughout the Muslim world certainly is that part of the country that has been in close contact with the West, and so it has adapted culturally to the West and has moved over that way. And the country has been clinging to the traditional ways, and in terms of like development or aid or something, the country's always been left behind, the city's always been further forward, and there's been a war between city and country. It's an extreme version of red state, blue state. You know, we got it too. When the Soviets came, the foreign occupation war mapped right onto this other war. So that when the Mujahideen won that war, it was also the countryside winning against the city. Now, the thing about the progressiveness of Afghanistan that I think is, I want to just say a few words about it, is there was that period from about 1930 to about mid-1970s when, even though it was mostly during that time a chip in the Cold War, Afghanistan had some cultural sovereignty within its borders, and it was dealing with whatever the problems of Afghanistan was on its own terms. And during that period, there was a lot of social change and a lot of social progress in Afghanistan. And between mid-60s and mid-70s, on questions like women's rights and education for girls and stuff, I think Afghanistan went through like 2,000 years of social progress in 10 years. And what I want to call out about that is that people left to their own, when they're culturally sovereign over their own lives, they're going to probably, you can sort of trust that they will be progressive if they can. I think there is progressive elements in Afghan society as there are regressive elements. And I think that you cannot bring social progress to a country from outside. I think that whatever the problems may be for women in Afghan society, America can't solve them. And I feel wrenched when I see, as I have for many years now, the media portrayal of our mission as saving, and I'll put it the way I usually hear it, saving women from Afghans. And I'm thinking, well, it's saving Afghan women from Afghan men. There's something different about that. So I think for Afghanistan and for many places, the first thing is to accept cultural sovereignty for those people. And then build alliances and ties on other issues that everybody can agree on. It's like, I don't think you can accomplish much if you think and they think you think that you're coming over there to change how they live. Right after 9/11, I was in some meeting and somebody came to me and said, "Oh, Mr. Ansary, if only we could go over there and teach those Afghans." And I said, "Well, what would you teach them?" And she said, "Just everything."